One line in the Madlanga Commission records should still make anyone pause. 3 senior officials swore under oath, yet their timelines could not all be true at the same time. That single contradiction cracked open a year of hearings that revealed not just facts, but the hidden mechanics of power, silence, and delay. What unfolded was not a neat story of guilt and innocence, but a slow exposure of how institutions behave when pressure arrives quietly rather than violently, and how accountability can be stretched without ever being completely broken. As the Commission began its work, what stood out immediately was how its mandate subtly grew beyond what the public first understood. Issues that were initially described as narrow suddenly touched wider decisions, older records, and people who were never meant to be in the spotlight. This expansion did not happen with loud announcements. It happened through questions, document requests, and testimony that led naturally to other doors. By the time observers realized how far the inquiry had traveled, the Commission was already mapping a much larger picture of responsibility. Early testimony introduced a pattern that would repeat throughout the year. Different versions of the same event, all delivered confidently, all under oath. One witness would describe a meeting as informal and insignificant, while another framed the same gathering as decisive and urgent. These were not minor memory slips. They were accounts that changed the meaning of decisions affecting real outcomes. The Commission did not rush to accuse, but the inconsistencies lingered in the room, forcing listeners to confront the uncomfortable gap between truth and authority. Documents, which many expected to clarify everything, often did the opposite. Files were incomplete, dates were missing, and key decisions appeared to have no clear paper trail at all. In a system built on records and approvals, the absence of documentation became its own form of evidence. The Commission repeatedly returned to the same question: how could actions with serious consequences leave behind so little formal trace? The silence of the paperwork became as telling as spoken words. One of the most unsettling revelations involved decisions made without signatures. Authority seemed to move through phone calls, informal understandings, and assumed consent rather than written directives. Officials spoke of knowing what was expected, without being able to point to who had actually instructed them. This blurred line between formal power and informal influence revealed how systems can function smoothly while remaining dangerously unaccountable. Equally striking was who did not speak. Some senior figures, whose roles suggested they should have been central to the story, were absent from the witness stand or offered minimal engagement. Their silence shaped the narrative as powerfully as testimony did. The Commission never said that silence meant guilt, but it made clear that absence from scrutiny leaves gaps that facts alone cannot fill. As hearings continued, legal gray areas began to dominate discussion. Certain actions were defended as lawful while still raising serious ethical questions. Lawyers debated interpretations, pointing out that legality does not always equal legitimacy. The Commission exposed how rules can be followed in form while violated in spirit, and how systems can protect themselves by staying just within the lines. Another layer emerged around institutional loyalty. Witnesses spoke carefully, often emphasizing their duty to protect the organization rather than the public interest. The tension between serving the institution and serving citizens hovered over the proceedings. At times, it felt as though truth was filtered through concern for stability, reputation, and continuity, rather than transparency. Warnings were another recurring theme. Evidence showed that red flags had been raised early by individuals who sensed problems ahead. These warnings did not vanish. They were acknowledged, noted, and then quietly set aside. The Commission traced how cautionary voices were absorbed into bureaucracy, until urgency dissolved into procedure. As the year progressed, the cost of delay became clearer. Accountability postponed long enough begins to lose its force. Decisions made years earlier were now being examined when consequences had already settled into everyday reality. The Commission revealed how time itself can protect systems, not through conspiracy, but through fatigue and fading public attention. Financial decisions added further complexity. Funds were allocated, shifted, or committed under circumstances that appeared rushed and lightly supervised. Oversight mechanisms existed, but they often reacted after the fact. The hearings suggested that money moved through structures faster than accountability could keep up. Behind closed doors, hints of political pressure surfaced. No witness openly named a mastermind, yet phrases like the environment at the time and expectations from above appeared repeatedly. These indirect references painted a picture of influence that is felt rather than documented, shaping choices without ever signing its name. Experts called to interpret the evidence did not always agree. Some argued the commission had uncovered systemic failure, while others insisted the findings showed isolated misjudgments rather than coordinated wrongdoing. This clash of interpretations reminded the public that evidence does not speak on its own. It is always filtered through perspective and principle. Media coverage played its own role. Certain moments dominated headlines, while others passed with little attention despite their significance. The Commission's work revealed how public understanding can be shaped not only by what is said, but by what is amplified and what quietly fades away. A difficult truth emerged around accountability without arrests. The Commission made moral responsibility visible, but legal consequences remained uncertain. This gap raised a troubling question about modern governance. What happens when wrongdoing is acknowledged, yet punishment never arrives? Public trust surfaced repeatedly as the unspoken casualty. Citizens watching the hearings expressed frustration, confusion, and resignation. For many, the Commission confirmed what they suspected about power, but also deepened doubt about whether exposure leads to change. Importantly, the Commission also highlighted what it could not prove. Gaps in evidence, missing records, and legal thresholds limited how far conclusions could go. Suspicion alone was not enough, and the Commission made clear that truth has boundaries when proof runs out. Looking forward, the Madlanga Commission may shape how future inquiries operate. Its methods, challenges, and unresolved questions will influence expectations of transparency and consequence. It has already set a benchmark for how much can be revealed, even when final answers remain incomplete. In the end, the year's revelations circle back to a single unresolved tension. The Commission illuminated patterns, exposed weaknesses, and raised uncomfortable questions. What remains uncertain is not what happened, but what will be done next, and whether revelation alone is enough to change the systems it has laid bare.